welcome, folks.
Howdy.
Yeah. Do we have a chat box where they can?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Were we able to pull that up? Yeah. My bad, guys.
We'll have to. I'll work this out. But we are live.
Okay. Well, welcome, folks. Sorry about all the movement of time. We're just trying to coordinate. Me with work, Brady with the kiddos. Okay, so we're going. Okay, cool. But we got it. We're here. Happy Ramadan to any practitioners of the faith. If not, just happy Wednesday. It's springtime. It's a beautiful April here in Houston, Texas. So hope you guys are enjoying your weather wherever you're at. Let's see. We got several things that we got notes. Brady's got a little to-do list for us that we can maybe go over certain topics.
And to begin that, I guess we should say, because we're I catch myself watching some of our other edited videos, and I forget to do proper welcomes, and also thank our patrons.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to give our shout out to our two patrons right now.
Okay. Right on.
Yeah, who are funding this whole operation at this point, and they've supplied some of the material that they would like to see too. So that's part of the
cool.
of the dig as well. So if
all right.
And you're also interested in joining the chat, make sure if you join, you'll get access to the Discord. Private Discord for everyone to kind of share information and kind of keep track of some of this stuff and bother chance in real time, so hot debates. So but otherwise, thanks to all the commenters, the usual suspects that continue to come back and provide great refutations and dissertations to our stuff and vice versa, or collaborations in some cases too. So thanks again.
Absolutely. Shout out to Mr. Abzu, aka Michael Reed. He and I have been going heavily back and forth on the last video. Did Marlowe kill Shakespeare? I like that title better, maybe. Did Shakespeare kill Marlowe? Which itself was a little bit of a clickbait title. If you haven't watched that one, check it out. It's more like, did Monday kill Marlowe? And really, did Monday get Marlowe killed? But there is, some connection to Shakespeare, and people want to say that it is Shakespeare's text. Some people want to say that it is Shakespeare's text that Monday is copying, and so the author of the essay that we read, I think it's Thomas Merriam, was taking a step further and saying, well, if Monday's copying this and turning it into censors, let's remember he's a spy. And when he turns it in, right around that time, at least the time that people conjecture that this would have happened, circa 1593, that's when everything starts shutting down, and Thomas Merriam goes and shows that, look, there's other precedent for the theater getting shut down for censorial reasons, and it's not just plague. Plague may be a convenient way to brush it over later, but no, it may have been for actual censorial reasons, and right after that, people, and right before that even, people start hitting the floor. Robert Greene dies. Thomas Watson dies. Thomas Kidd, Christopher Marlowe die.
Nash.
Nash, he holds on. He's one of the few survivors.
Okay.
But 5 years later, though, is he still around? No, he's gone. He's disappeared. He's up in Yarmouth, and he never comes back. And it's like
Lyly also, right? Doesn't he just stop writing? Or one of those guys.
He stops writing, but he
not dead. Yeah,
he's not dead.
But
he
just stops.
Yeah, he just stops. No more. I don't know. The whole university wit scene is fascinating, and I'm gonna do more and more digging into that. But that video, cool one. Please check it out. More than anything, I wanted to impress the idea that, look, there's a lot of overlap between the literary scene and the sort of political espionage scene. So many of these writers seem to be, connected through Walsingham and seem to be spies of Walsingham or Whitgift or Leicester or someone else on top of being some sort of literary man, whether a writer, a copyist, a playwright, translator, etc. And that holds true for a lot of people, like even John Florio. Shout out to you Florio folks. Florio's supposed to be another one of these little tentacles of Francis Walsingham in the 80s. He's maybe doing some dirty work for Walsingham. As is Marlowe, as is a bunch of people. So, yeah. Where do you want to go from here? What do we got on the docket?
Well, on the to-do list, I guess get down to brass tacks. One of our patrons sort of asked maybe a refresher or a reevaluation of all the big document videos that we've done that have been most of our highest viewed ones. So, Henslowe Diary, Sir Thomas More, Francis Mears. I don't think we've done one exactly on Parnassus Plays, but we've definitely mentioned it a bunch of times.
Yeah, we need
and maybe also a little bit of defensive poetry. But just kind of going down, seeing if we have any new thoughts of any of that stuff currently, or a new lens on it. I would say that maybe Sir Thomas More, we did kind of just do that with the Marlowe video, right? We were kind of still going over some of this hand D stuff. Still, maybe, making new pitches essentially, because Miriam is one of the guys that refuted Chillington, essentially, right?
Absolutely.
So we're trying to provide more viewpoints,
absolutely.
Cherry picking the facts that we like for a Philip Sidney case, but no. All just aside, but I don't know if you have anything right off the top of this list that that kind of jogs your memory for something.
Well, let's see. Henslow's definitely our biggest video, so let's go ahead and just start talking about Henslowe Diary, because we have a little bit of a conflicted stance, because we came onto this saying group theory, because we said, hey, we like Bacon, hey, we like Oxford, but not a lot of people are trying to put the two together. And then there's some compelling stuff outside of those two, like Henry Neville seems to have his own little case, which is weird and bizarre until you realize, he's like really good buddies with Francis Bacon, because that's his uncle, which they're more like cousins or even brothers as we might think of it, but it is his uncle, because it's Bacon's way older sister's son, even though they're like only a few years apart. But came across Neville. It's like, all right, there's a bunch of stuff happening here. There's the whole Marlowe Shakespeare continuum. It's like, all right, we need to look into group theory. And we didn't start this channel out by like, hey, let's start pitching Philip Sidney. That was not on the docket. That was just kind of a random thing that I came across, because I wanted to try and possibly explain why the heck we were seeing Samuel Daniel in Shakespeare. And in some of our first videos where we're going through the history of Shakespeare, several of those group theorists, including T.W. White, says, look, Samuel Daniel's like one of the main authors of Shakespeare, and it's because of kind of what people would later notice in the academic community, that Shakespeare's not just like using Daniel, he's maybe using Daniel in manuscript form, which doesn't even like fully make sense. Like how would Shakespeare the playwright be getting his hand on Daniel the not playwright, getting his hand on their poems and stuff? And maybe the connections through Florio, through Rossley or something like that, because Daniel's buddies with Florio, and Florio's tutoring Rossley, and Shakespeare's supposed to be getting patronized by Rossley. But like, all that only works if, like, one, you believe that Shakespeare was actually the writer of Venus and Adonis. Like, as much as all of Shakespeare authorship question gets stuck looking at the plays, like, the first thing with Shakespeare's name on it is Venus and Adonis. And so it's like, he's a poet for a noble patron, and then all of a sudden, like, he's been a playwright the whole time. And it's like, why did he have to do that? Like, what's that about? And it's like, because that's when the theaters were closed, so he had to make some money. Okay, maybe, I don't know. But let me see. Let's go ahead and talk about Henslowe Diary. So there's still a lot that I have to read to make a better understanding of this diary. Like, so many of these early plays that are listed in the first section, where we don't get the author names, but we get the plays, the dates, and how much money they made. A lot of those plays are in print. Like, we have them in print. We don't always necessarily have the author of those plays on the print, but we have had people just historically attribute the authors, and we've all said, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That's what people say. There's maybe good reason to believe it. But regardless if it has an author or not, there's just a bunch of them that I got to go read. But I think that Henslowe Diary is maybe the start of how to put together a group theory. Because if you go and look at the height of the theater era, circa 1600, right? That's when, Julius Caesar goes into stuff like Hamlet, and you get the start of, Marston, and Ben Jonson really starts kicking into gear. You get the War of the Theaters, like everything's just humming and firing on all cylinders. Henslowe's got 20-something playwrights just putting out plays. That's the era that we need to look at, and if we look at that era, how many playwrights are writing for Lord Chamberlain's men? We got 20-something writing for the Admiral's men. How many are writing for the Lord Chamberlain's men? It's 2. And then it's 3, and then it's maybe upwards of 5, and that's supposed to be the bigger and better company than the one that the Admiralsman is using. And I think this is so distorted by like 1960s, 1970s auteur theory that like hated the Hollywood studio and hated that the whole factory scene, and they want to say that the real genius art thing, that's what can rise above. But like, no way, dude. No way that some company had only 2 guys, and the 2 guys are Shakespeare and Johnson. So like, okay, maybe Shakespeare and Johnson could like King Leonidas fight off the entire horde, but like, no, like you can't have 2 guys writing and keeping up with a company that has 20-something people. And also, like, Ben Jonson wrote for that company, kind of before, during, and after this time, too. And the third guy that gets added, it's Thomas Dekker, who is the main writer of the other team anyway. And so it's like, I've never quite understood, like, what is, we say that Lord Chamberlain's men, it's just structurally different. It's a different setup. Like, you can't assume that they're the same setup. And it's like, surely we can't assume that. There's no way we could assume that. So what is the assumption then? And
it's like seeing some like NBA rivalry between 2 teams, and then the very next season you see one of those players like move to that other team. Yeah. It's like, wait a second, y'all were just beefing last year. Now you're like working together, like, or at least working under the same like company or whatever. Right. So I don't know. It's hard to make. Yeah, it's hard to make heads or tails of like what this scene's actually supposed to be and viewed as. And I don't know, maybe there's some proper, historian for that whole avenue, but to try to explain, it's either this is some like really side hustle maybe, or it's only paid for certain things, and I don't know, it's got some other sort of tie to the company itself for whatever reason, I don't know.
And so this big discrepancy, I think, gets explained away by a few things. Like, I've gone out and asked Jeff Mead, Mr. Famous YouTube Stratfordian, Coriolanus. I asked him to go watch some of our handy stuff and the Henslowe Diary stuff, and he said, neat video, this is nice speculation, but like, the problem is that I'm making assumptions because we don't have the other names. We didn't get a Lord Chamberlain's diary the way that we got Henslowe Diary, so we don't have all the... If we didn't get the Henslowe Diary, we wouldn't have such and such name and such and such name and such and such name, and it's like, that would be true if some of those names didn't actually get printed and their names got printed on the plays, and some of them did.
What I was wondering,
And so it's like, there's still others, and like, yeah, surely 5, 6, 7, 10 of them would be lost to time, but there's still 14 other people that weren't lost to time. We have their names. They're printed on other stuff. Where are those other? Why do they only need 2? And really, it's just Shakespeare. It's, and so the way that they explain that away is like, well, this is a different setup. These guys are just like mercenary playwrights that are getting hired per thing. Shakespeare's like an actor shareholder, so like he's not really getting paid by play. So he's, he's like a salary guy. He's an owner, and so he just needs this company to like do really well. And so they find the best stock plays that they can, and they recycle through those. And he adds his own to be the special occasion repertoire. And as he makes more get cycled into the old repertoire, and they can cycle out some of the older, crappier stock plays, and that's how they do it. And they would have, 15 to 20 to 25 plays in their actor repertoire that they could cycle through in a season. So, because they don't ever really show the same play 2 or 3 times in a row. Like, you do one, maybe after a few days you can recycle it, or you can play the same one 2 or 3 times in a week, but never ding, ding, ding. And it's usually like once a week at most. And more often, more like once a month or twice a month. Because you don't want to go see the same show. So like, I don't know, as much as, okay, yeah, that's maybe theoretically possible. Where did all those stock plays come from? Who had the rights on them? That's a lot of plays. Who's writing those? Are they all being taken from all these other guys, or are they taken from older guys, or are you saying just lesser actor writers are writing it, or I don't understand. It's still so many blanks there.
Yeah, and when you start saying like, oh yeah, use some stock plays. Well, then what lines did he add exactly?
Mm-hmm.
And then. Well, that's when he's a master of Greek, and he just learned all that Greek stuff and then threw him into the stock plays, and that's why you can really tell, or something along those lines. I don't know.
Right, and I don't know. So much of the discussion is made to seem like Shakespeare and Burbage have so much control over this scene, and it really has nothing to do with the patrons, and I just find it interesting because dude, there's so much overlap between. Lord Chamberlain, Lord Admiral, they're all in the same little circles. They're all some of the most powerful dudes in England. I just wonder, especially with how much, they would be right to say, oh, don't look into that. They'd be right to say that if we didn't have actual laws being enforced by the Crown, by the Privy Council, that monopolized which people could have play companies, and how many play companies, and where they could show, and how many theaters, but we do have all that. You were only allowed to have 3 acting companies in London at the time, and everything else had to go on tour, and who could get a license to do that was pretty much restricted to aristocratic patrons, and so you couldn't just be a jack of all trades kind of smart guy and I'm gonna start a theater. No, you had to have licenses and patronage to get that, and so I think downplaying that aspect has helped build up this constructed narrative of blue-collar Shakespeare businessman, entrepreneur, and he started this whole thing. He's a genius businessman. I just feel like if we got Burbage's diary, fun fact, I bet you wouldn't see Shakespeare getting paid for any plays. That'd be my speculation. I would speculate that you'd see the same exact freaking names that you see in Henslowe's diary, maybe a few others that have been lost to time. Maybe we'd find that a few actors in the Chamberlain's men are writing plays, a few actors in Admiral's men, but by and large, it's going to be all the same stupid names. And I would also hazard to guess that if we got Burbage's diary, it would conveniently be structured like Henslowe's diary, where we can't put all the information together either. We don't get the era that has the university wits authors' names. Who's paying Christopher Marlowe to write that play for Lord Strange? We didn't get that. We never get, paid unto Mr. Kit Marlowe 4 shillings for his work in the Book of Malta. Like, we don't get that. We just get Jew of Malta played February something 1591, and it made 50 pounds, big bucks, and no author name. And sure enough, we can go look at the printing, and it doesn't have Marlowe's name on it. Not until after he's dead. Now that he's dead, we can put his name on it, and it's like, oh, because authorship's just now starting to be constructed, and guess what else gets printed with an author's name on it right after Marlowe dies? Yeah, Shakespeare. And so I think we just start to get the construction of authorship in general is a money-making thing, is a sort of focal, not a focal point, but more of a tool or a mouthpiece for propaganda, like this focused, kind of personified mouthpiece for a certain kind of agenda, or going along Yeats's sort of theory that Marlowe's the rebellious common man that questions authority, and but Shakespeare's Mr. Middle of the Road, whereas you have maybe other people, and we don't get all of his plays printed, but maybe someone like Drayton or Monday or someone like that would be full on like upholding the conventions, and I think that's what we have is we get these kind of constructed personas based on the stylistic and ideological similarities of the texts that are given to them. But I don't know that any of these authors are one single person or pen. Like, I think a lot of these are serial constructions, and we get reworks and edits, and even the original compositions, like Marlowe, for instance. Like, it's at least two people in most of the plays. It's probably the Nash hand and what I call the Green or Chettle hand. But the Green or Chettle hand's much more the bombastic Tamburlaine stuff. The Nash hand's much more the little quick jibey wit stuff like Jew of Malta. They're very stylistically different. But Edward II's probably 3-4 hands. Like Edward II, that's a long one and it's all over the place. Same kind of arguments with Shakespeare, and that's why I think stylometrics are an awesome thing. I just don't think anybody's figured out how to apply stylometrics correctly, because necessarily everybody's going in thinking that so-and-so is the author of this canon, and nobody's even looked at that canon to realize that you can't use that to find one hand if it's more than one hand itself. That's stupid. Right. And that's why stylometrics are useless at this point. Nobody's even made that. You have to find some other test to break those things down to separate what the stylistic hands are in it, and because all this is all based on machine learning anyway, and so you have to somehow teach the machine all that information. I don't know that that's been totally parsed out, and so there's, I think, a long ways to go with that kind of stuff. But if you do have a good set of data that you can actually trust and say, yes, we know this is by this author and this is by this author and only these people have touched it, then yeah, you can figure it out. Stylometrics will figure it out for you. It can do that. But
we kind of showed that in the the last Marlowe video, right, where we had that chart that showed how it was, I forget which play it was, maybe the Monday plays.
Yeah.
Matched up with
the
certain
Monday and the Chettle and the Shakespeare plays.
And yeah, there was all over the place, sort of, and the ones that maybe you thought would have made more sense about certain Shakespeare works being closer in regards of I could see Macbeth and Julius Caesar being more like each other than Macbeth and something
measure
random.
For measure,
whatever it was. And so and that's when we were kind of pointing out I feel like even the Shakespeare sort of identification is sort of wonky and not calibrated correctly.
No,
maybe
and I think a lot of us, when we make these readings, we want to what's up, Ian? Shout out, dude. Give you a call after this. Thanks for tuning in, dude. Theater is a collaborative art form. So we had a commenter the other day, and it was pretty thoughtful, insightful comment, because we were pitching in another video that The Tempest, and this is something Ian and I have talked about over the phone, that The Tempest is actually a John Lyly play. And I like this. I like this. This is my fun little pitch. But John Lyly, that's a weird, wacky one. But I've never heard anybody pitch that The Tempest is Marlowe, other than just people saying, Marlowe wrote all of Shakespeare. But one of the commenters was saying, like, no, dude, this is like clearly a Marlowe play, because Jew of Malta, where's that set? Malta. Where is The Tempest set? Loosely, unnamed, non-specific island in the Mediterranean. It's clearly in the Mediterranean, somewhere off of Italy or the northern coast of Africa. We're getting towards Malta territory. And furthermore, like Prospero, like as Yeats has pointed out, it's a complete inversion of Faustus. So we have some like bizarre structural relation between those two. And then Jew of Malta itself is about a father and a daughter. Tempest is about a father and a daughter. Okay, we got a lot of stuff lining up here. And like from that, it's like, why not consider, The Tempest is a Marlovian play? And it's a good question. I think there's several hang-ups in academia that makes that question difficult. Like, one, how many comedies did Marlowe write?
None, technically? Or did you write one? Yeah.
No. None. And then there were none. Yeah. And so it's kind of like, how many tragedies did Lyly write? None.
He only wrote comedies mainly?
Yeah, comedies.
And did you say that most of the comedies are based on Ovid stuff?
Ovid, and yeah, mostly Ovid or no, Ovid. Mother Bombay's not. That one's like an English thing, but I haven't gotten to Mother Bombay yet. But pretty much everything else, yeah, Ovid. But he also heavily uses Erasmus, and that's something that I want to do a video on at some point. I'm still doing more research to see just who the heck is like talking about Erasmus other than John Lyly and Philip Sidney. I know those two are like huge into Erasmus in the 80s. Who else is? I need to know that, because those two are using it heavily. Let's see. But yeah, so I don't know. At some point, that goes into what I'm saying though. That and to go along with our YouTube commenter that's pitching Marlowe, like, yeah, like why can't we ask that that's Marlowe? Well, because we have this constructed persona based on not actual facts, but based on an assumption from what we have as the works. So if all the works are tragedies, why would he have written a comedy? Well, it's like there's no law that says he can't go write a comedy. There's no law that says that's not possible. So like, why have we said that he only writes tragedies? Well, because we're basing a biography on what we have in the works, and like that only takes you so far, and you can't use that as like some constrictive limitation to say, well, look, we only have tragedies, so that therefore blah blah blah. Like, that's a fallacious argument. That's an argument based on experience. Like, if you can maybe make an inductive argument after enough, but Marlowe only has like 5 plays, so if he had like 30 plays and they're all tragedies and it's over decades, all right, sure, dude. But like, we only have like his 5 plays or 6. How many is it? Well, if you count Tamburlaine as 1 or 2, that's the difference. So you got Dido, you got Tamburlaine 1, Tamburlaine 2, you got Jew of Malta, or sorry, I'm going out of order. You got Edward II, Jew of Malta, Massacre at Paris, so yeah, 6. And lo and behold, John Lyly has conveniently right around that number. So I forgot where I was going with this. Oh yeah, but the Marlowe thing. That said, I don't personally want to go too far with it because I need to go reread Marlowe and see how much stylistic evidence there is for overlap there. I found there's a bunch of stylistic overlap between The Tempest and Midsummer Night's Dream, even though I think Midsummer Night's Dream's a much better play. But it's still got a lot of parallel passage, kind of same phraseology, same kind of syntactical setup kind of stuff. But I don't know. Like I said, I don't think Marlowe's super well defined. Like, go read Edward II, then go read Jew of Malta, then go read Tamburlaine. Like, they don't all feel like the same author. Like, they don't. I wish I could do that so readily with Shakespeare. I always say that Shakespeare's not unified and that they don't all feel like the same author, but I have a hard time picking out like 3 plays that are so like triangulated away from each other, because there's this weird like averaging effect to Shakespeare where everything starts to, in some cases, feel just tangentially similar to another thing that's tangentially similar to another thing that's now back to it, because we now have a big enough sample size. Like, Marlowe's sample size is different enough where we can't maybe connect something back to it, but Shakespeare's sample size is so big that these 2 plays may be vastly different, but there's some third play out there that does have features of both of them. And then all of a sudden it's like, nope, those are connected. And it's like, but like, you know, technically that's probably right. But like, I think group theory would maybe explain this averaging effect and why things pop up in weird connection with each other. And, but yeah, let me see, where do we want to go from here?
So we was kind of just, you know, what a huge tangent on the Henslowe diary itself. And then we kind of talked about Sir Thomas More. We already just talked about that with all the the Marlowe video that we just kind of expounded on. Have we mentioned? We did also mention Francis Mears because we brought up Monday again, because in Mears Monday was the best plotter. Yeah. But we were sort of making that read on like, is this a sort of tongue-in-cheek, you know, sort of literal, is like, you know, Monday's literally plotting against people and kind of getting them set up, kind of honeypotting them, or entrapping them maybe, or something like that, right? With some of these, you know, Catholic schemes or something. So but then we were also wondering, well, then, I guess just going off this now, you know, just to reiterate, because I think we talked about that in the original video, but how much of these other lines in Mears do we also need to take at that same sort of ironic level, essentially, right? Weird literal level, because the best plotter, plotter. Not someone who writes, you know, plots, but literally
spy plots, and sets up people and plots other people's demises, and so here's the thing with Mears. Oxfordians have done their tricks to point out that you can, you know, if you count the number 17 in some certain ways or other stuff and line up the lines, we get come back to that in a second. We get this way of lining up Oxford with Shakespeare and show that Oxford is Shakespeare and blah blah blah. Which, fine, okay, that's neat, but almost none of that like explains a lot of weirdness that's in Mears. Like, it may explain how many people were included, or which letters were maybe included, or something like that. But like, why is Ben Jonson listed as a tragedian in Mears? Because Ben Jonson's like not known as a tragedian. He only wrote a few, and all of them are 5 years after Mears or later. He is very much a comedic writer, especially circa 1597, 1598. Like, why is he listed as a tragedian? That's weird. What does Mears even know what he's talking about? I mean, is Ben Jonson as an author totally constructed yet? And Mears has the demo tape or the outline of the rough draft of Who's Who.
Yeah, the playbook. The first playbook.
Yeah, exactly. But it's been tweaked since. Because I mean, there's others like I forget which ones, but pull it off the top of my head. But like, I feel like Dekker gets listed as a tragedian and not a comedy guy, and it's like, okay, that's looked weird.
And also just to bring it up as far as, remember who's an actual aristocrat? Well, I guess they both do actually, but don't Philip and De Vere both get mentioned in Mira's?
Oh yeah, I mean,
yeah, right.
Yeah, like so De Vere is listed as one of the best for writing comedies. So like,
but what's funny is that you always hear from them that, or at least from some people, I always take 6 Days Theater pitch on this, but I still see people pitch that he can't be found out writing this stuff because he'll get all embarrassed or whatever. But then here's some publications saying that he's best for known writing this stuff. So
right.
How does that? How do you rectify that?
What's that word? Derogance.
Yes. So, how does that explain that in this situation?
That's something that I've struggled with too. That like, if it's just derogance that's kept these aristocrats' names off of publication, then like surely Mira's would be thrown in the clink for doing something like saying like, oh, homeboy wrote a ton of plays, because that totally undercuts all the derogance stuff. And so for me, like, it maybe suggests that if there is pen names going on, that it's something beyond derogance. Maybe derogance is still sort of a thing, but like at some point it's got to go beyond derogance. We're getting to what's the term I want to use? Quasi-governmental espionage, political maneuvering. We're getting the machinations of a conspiratorial type setup where it's not just don't put my name on it. It's like it's not don't put my name on it. It's like please put this name on it. It's less about concealing the identity and more about constructing
creating the narrative essentially.
Right. And the hiding of the identity is that nobody wants to get caught creating the narrative.
Right.
And so it's like it's a 2-in-1 there. Sorry, where was I going with this?
About the derogance, and then how do you explain?
Yeah. So for
Mira's.
Like. Another thing that I want to point out is that like the way Mira's lists it in each section is it kind of goes in chronological order, and so like I've seen people say he puts De Vere first, but like that maybe suggests that like De Vere's plays are some of the earliest in the ones that are being listed, that he's not writing concurrently in the 90s. He's writing back when he's young in the 70s and maybe into the 80s, and that like these other guys are the writers later, but like even that suggests that like, well, all these people are real people alongside Edward de Vere, who's a real person, but like my problem is that like once again, like they say de Vere only writes comedies. They could have listed Edward de Vere the best for tragedy and the best for comedy. We could still line up Shakespeare's name 17 times with de Vere's. Like we could still do that. Why didn't they do that? Why is it only in the one?
Yeah.
And furthermore, why is Chapman in both? Like, Chapman should have barely made the list, dude. Like, I'm still such not a Chapman fan. I gotta come around on Chapman, but man, Chapman's goofy, dude. Chapman's weird. Like, he just has some of the worst titles ever too. Like, nobody wants to read a play called Bussy d'Amboise. I show my students that. They're like, oh.
Yeah.
All right, okay, kids. And then they showed me what that word meant. I was like, oh, God. Oh, God. Why do y'all know this? But, okay, that's not the word I want to follow up with. Chapman also is kind of like the same way. Yeah, Chapman does write tragedies, and Bussy d'Amboise is super famous tragedy, but like that's not till like 1610 or whatever. Why is he being listed for the best tragedian already in 1598? Maybe he wrote one or two by then, but like it seems to me all the ones he's listed for in Henslowe, they're all comedies. So I haven't quite totally understood that. But yeah, why take the extra effort to say, Chapman, you're the best of both worlds? Because like you could do that with several other people. You could do that with Johnson. You could not really. I mean, Johnson was only writing comedies at the time. Later on, you could do that with Johnson, but you could do that definitely with Decker at the time. Like, if you're already listing him as a tragedian, you could definitely list him as a comedic writer. Same with Drayton. Let me see. There's probably others. Like, probably Haywood can do both. Webster's not around yet to get listed. I don't even remember if, but Chettle can do both. What's the distinction? Why not list both? Everybody, like, I don't know. So I don't know if that means to call into question Mears' knowledge or if there's some other meaning to this. Yeah, it feels like someone's playing games. Yeah, like exactly. Soltron. Also, welcome back. Good to see you.
Yeah, man. Good to see you.
All right, so what's Apollo got for us?
Yeah, and good to see him as well. Looking for the XML file for the Stationer's Register. Found it on academic sites that I don't have permissions for. Ooh. Then found Shakespeare and the Stationers by Kurt Kirschbaum, 65. I want to look for patterns in the printers and chain of rights holders on various works. Baum says that there are at most 65 printing presses run by 25 master printers. Yes. A small world.
Yes, absolutely. Like, I love, that's Apollo's kind of shtick, is that, like, this world's only so big, you know?
Which we totally agree with sometimes.
Right.
At least they've made it to be this way, that it's very coincidentally, that
right.
as soon as you start kind of pulling the thread, that's what you find, right?
Right. Like, I mean, and it's just kind of a factual thing that, like, I don't know, we live in a pretty big city, so trying to pinpoint something out of 5 million people is tough, but, like, you know, but London at the time is much smaller than Houston is now, and, like, all of England may have only had, like, 1 million people at that time, and, like, how many people are in the peerage, and, like, there's only so many people, and then there's only so many people after that in the gentry, and, like, the way that things are stratified and, like, into class systems, it kind of makes this a lot easier for us that we can, like, pinpoint just how many people we do and don't need to look at in various situations. And, like, I don't know, the world seems too small for me personally, for people like John Lyly and Philip Sidney to have never crossed paths. I don't think their world is big enough. I don't think they have so many people and so many institutions and so much, like, I know we have a lot of connective sort of stuff to connect us into things to make us more easily cross paths. You know, our 6 degrees of separation have turned into, like, what, 4.2 or something. But, like the point being that even so, like, John Lyly and Philip Sidney are both from Kent. They're both born in the same year. They're both have grandfathers that came up through the reign of Henry VIII and are incredibly learned men. They're incredibly learned families. They both go to Oxford. They both write masks and dramatic material for the Queen. Like, they're both into the same exact kind of sources, and maybe it doesn't have to mean Philip Sidney is John Lyly or something like that, or that the writers of both are Francis Bacon is something. It doesn't have to be that, but, like, at some point, I just kind of want to know, like, why have we nothing linking those two? I go on to JSTOR, and I don't even see people making analysis between the two, even though, for the early 80s, like, name 2 other authors. Like, name another author from the early 80s that we have stuff from that everybody's like, yeah, that's the bee's knees. Like, up until 85, 86, like, there's 2 people. And then once you get to 85, 86, all the rest of the University Wits gang pops in, and we get all sorts of other stuff. And, you know, okay, maybe Spencer's around in the 80s, but, like, other than Spencer, and, like, sure enough, there is a bunch of, like, comparing Spencer and Lyly and comparing Spencer and Sidney, but I don't see a lot of Sidney Lyly analysis. There is one or two essays. One's kind of like a sequel to the other by a different author, albeit, but they're old. But it's just called Elizabethan Rhetoric, or Sidney's Rhetoric in the Arcadia, and then the later one's Lyly's Rhetoric and Euphuism, and it's like doing kind of a follow-up, because the guy that was doing the Sidney's Rhetoric was kind of just crapping all over Lyly. He was just like, look, Sidney has all this, like, purpose behind his rhetoric, and Lyly his rhetoric is just there to be artsy and, like,
hit the
Yeah,
hit the check the boxes or
yeah,
something.
and that Lyly's just an inferior logician more than rhetorician. That like they can hang with each other rhetorically. They can both throw in the device. Here's anadiplosis.
Yeah, anadiplosis.
He's saying that Sidney can do it to this like logical conclusion and come out with this argument and knows how to structure an argument in the form like of old school rhetoric, that Lyly ultimately just like, I don't care about that, I just want it to sound as cool as possible. But this is coming out of this whole Victorian tendency to write off euphuism as, oh, he's just trying to be as flowery as possible, sound as flowery as possible, that it was all about the sounds and not the ideas, and that those were two distinct things, and that was surely how you needed to read euphuism, and that euphuism put sounds over ideas, and other people would put ideas over sounds, and somehow Shakespeare could do both.
Yeah.
And because of those idiots, like George Saintsbury, we don't get to read Lyly. Nobody cares about Lyly. Nobody wants to talk about Lyly, and all we get's those two little, and so, expect something on Lyly in the future. Okay, let me see.
So Paul Cobain responds back. Yeah, we're reading some live chats here. Kirschbaum lists all the printers that printed bad quartos, so he is already looking for the same kind of patterns and connections that I am. Separate quest is I am assembling a database of who is who in the Tower of London, and what books did they have access to, and who were there and who was there at the same time.
Doing the Lord's work, Apollo.
Because I think I kind of maybe we talked about maybe Raleigh and someone else kind of being in the tower at the same time, and maybe hey, they could be this is a perfect time to also just be hitting the pin.
Yeah.
Not in the modern sense of hitting the pin, but
like what else can you do? And just some of the coolest, most smart, awesome, dudes and ladies of the time, like, were just some of the main features of the Tower of London, including people like Walter Raleigh or, the Earl of Northumberland, Henry Percy, or people like Anthony Bacon or Henry Wriothesley. Like, it's just a who's who of all awesome big names, and, Tower of London, super interesting. And I want to bring it back to Lyly, because I was like, okay, we're done with Lyly here, but no. Talking about the printing scene. So there's an awesome essay by Leah Scragg, who is like one of the only people talking about Lyly, and she's become the modern voice of Lyly. And she's sort of overturning a lot of stuff that G.K. Hunter put forward back in the 50s and 60s. And G.K. Hunter for the longest time was, you just took his word, like, he knows Lyly. But like, Leah Scragg is like, question a lot of his stuff, and I'm not a big fan of a lot of stuff that G.K. Hunter says, because I don't think it makes a lot of sense. I don't have a good argument for why he's wrong, but just none of it like kind of adds up to me. And whereas Leah Scragg, I don't agree with everything she says, but like it makes way more sense than G.K. Hunter, and she's much more careful about like making assumptions and conclusions and putting her own biases in there. Like, that's clear in Hunter and Bevington. It's not as clear in Scragg, but she has a really good essay about Edward Blount, because Edward Blount is the dude that prints. If you go back to the Lyly page, if you look up there, scroll down that printing page. There we go. 6 court comedies. We have Lyly's plays because Edward Blount goes out of his way to put all of Lyly's plays together and print it in 1632. That is a significant date, because that's the same time as Second Folio Shakespeare. And they even mention it here. And in her essay, she basically says that, like, look, Edward Blount may be the most important name in printing of the era. Everything that is printed of the era that's a big thing, like, probably not just Shakespeare, but, like, other people too, like, he's either directly working on it, or he's the main guy, or he knows the people that are directly working on it.
Didn't we also wonder if he was related to Charles Blount,
yes,
who Penelope marries to, right? So
yeah,
it's like another Blount person.
Or Edmund Blount, the famous Catholic recusant who has to like flee from England and is going to get his head cut off, but then somebody he has to go flee to continental Europe, and in 1580 a certain you-know-who or someone may have visited him, and I may have the date wrong, but it's like 80 or 81. Philip Sidney. But sorry, I got the name wrong. Not Edmund Blount. That's Edmund Campion. I'm totally mixing them up. Campion totally relates back to Thomas Campion. My bad. But Blount. There's another Blount. Sorry, Sir Christopher Blount. That's the other one.
Okay.
Sir Christopher Blount, who is one of the dudes that gets his head cut off during the Essex Rebellion.
Okay.
And he is married to... He's the one that remarries Leicester's widow, who is Essex's mom.
Huh. Okay. Well, we're still kind of in a very close, tight-knit, at least, close to Penelope. That's her brother.
But Penelope's mom marries a Blount, and she marries a Blount.
Yeah.
But I don't think those two Blounts are supposed to be related.
Okay.
But there's more weirdness because Charles Blount is Lord Mountjoy, and
that's right.
If we look at the Shakespeare signatures, five of the six Shakespeare signatures, I think, are from the Mountjoy case from 1611.
That's right.
So Mountjoy, and I don't know, Mountjoy's probably a place, so probably a lot of people got that name, but just, I don't know, there's just a lot of name overlaps, and that's probably something that's more common to people in England, but maybe to us Americans it psychs us out, and we're like, whoa, what the heck, this same word, but that is what you're supposed to do when you're like looking at these things. You're supposed to spot patterns in words. But the point being that I want to go back to Edward Blount, that like he's buddies with Thomas Thorpe. He's buddies with the Jaggards. He's working on like every important printing of the time, and so I think that it's maybe significant that instead of working on Shakespeare's corrected second folio, which is supposed to be the most important thing in the world, at least according to us modern scholars, instead of doing that, he's like, no, I'm gonna go out of my way to work on Lyly's. And so there's been a lot of debate as to how much veracity there is to Blount's like understanding and accounts of Lyly, and Scragg's going out and saying like, look, this dude turned down doing the Shakespeare stuff to do the Lyly stuff. He probably cares, so let's probably take his word at something of a face value. That said, people still doubt it because it's so late. 1632, it's so late. And there's probably good reason to doubt it, just because, at some point we have this construction of an author. Construction of an author is a print commodity. Construction of an author is a sort of ideological avatar for all these different ideologies that are in their works. Let me see, what else we got? What else you got on there?
What else do I have, sir? That was kind of a Francis Mears take. We kind of went into some of the Stationer's Registry with the comment there. Defensive poetry. I guess it's a contemporary document of the time period because we're still trying to trace just the lineage of thought and theater and drama of the time period in itself. And I think you were showing me some essay, and they were really talking about a lot of this stuff in DOP is like, this is what we think of drama today now.
So like, expect maybe several episodes in the future over defensive poetry, because there's definitely one that we will be doing very soon, going over an essay called Sidney's Feigned Apology by Ronald Laval. He's a academic scholar, philosopher, not just over literature, but Renaissance thinking and the dawn of science and theory and that kind of stuff, and alchemy. Ronald Laval's into Sidney, Bacon, all sorts of stuff, Montaigne. But he has this essay that says, look, you're not reading Sidney right. And I don't blame you. Nobody's reading Sidney right, because Sidney's smarter than you. And Ronald Laval shows us just why and how Sidney's smarter than us. And Ronald Laval's a pretty freaking smart dude, too. He is super dense in his writing, and we will have to unpack a lot of the things that he's saying, and we may get lost doing it sometimes, but Ronald Laval has to be that dense. I don't think that's just Ronald Laval being Ronald Laval. Like, you have to be that dense when talking about Sidney's defense of poetry to actually make sense of it. And basically the sort of gist is that like you need to have some sort of understanding that he is being ironic in many, many cases. There are several layers of irony. And once you understand this irony, and you understand this irony by spotting different patterns in the essay, and spotting structures in the essay, and putting statements that are clearly contradictions to each other, and opposing these contradictions, you start to understand that, okay, there is another level of meaning here, and we have to start making, synthesizing that meaning in our own head by weighing a bunch of different stuff together. And, ultimately, that practice itself is sort of what Sidney is pitching to us. And that's much deeper than anybody ever says about Sidney's defense of poetry. Everybody
just surface level sort of readings,
I was going back through some of our old comment stuff, and I was looking back at some of our original, Philip Sidney videos, and just some of the reactions to it. That why doesn't it rhyme? Like, dude, get the hell out of here! Like, excuse my French, but just be gone.
Exemplar profane wit. This comment.
And I'm sorry if that's your comment. If you're watching this, you're like, oh, that was my comment. Dang, like, I was being sarcastic. Oh, I'm sorry, my bad.
Touche.
But other comments that just like I got into it with one guy. I think he was an Oxfordian, but it need not be an Oxfordian. There's plenty of others. That was just saying that, Philip Sidney hates drama.
Yeah.
Hates drama.
Yeah.
It's like, did Sparknuts tell you that? Like,
yeah.
I
hate drama so much I wrote like a giant treatise on like what makes the most perfect drama, and if you were to do it right.
Over all these plays that I've clearly seen multiple times and have many thoughts over. Boy, I just hate drama as much as freaking a New York Times critics hates theater. Like why? Like, you know what I mean? It doesn't even make sense. Also, like. That people say that not knowing that Philip Sidney himself is known for actually having dramatic output. It's, not a lot of it's known, but I think that there's a lot of good reason to assume that there's more than just the little that we have. We have Lady of May, and we may have the Four Foster Children, but those are two masks that he wrote for Queen Elizabeth in the 70s and for Leicester for the Queen Elizabeth. But I would assume it's probably many more than that. We don't have a lot of documents on who's writing in the 70s for Leicester's Men or Oxford Men or any of these other people like Worcester's Men or Derby's Men or blah blah blah. We don't know who's writing up until the 80s, 90s, and even then the 80s it's just a handful of names. It's just the university wits, and then after that, like, I don't know, maybe some other actors or something. We don't know. So, let me see. Where do we want to go from here?
Paulo came back with another one. Blount entered both Antony and Cleopatra and Pericles, Prince of Tyre, into the Stationer's Register in 1608, published neither.
Interesting. And so, I wanted to say that, Blount's, also just an important, go-through man and doing some of this, paperwork kind of stuff, this administrative stuff. Who are these people, and what is their connection to maybe some of the folks that we might want to connect them to? And if they don't have a connection to these people, how do we make sense of that? Surely they do. I have not done that legwork. I'm not going to throw that on Apollo's plate just this second. But, at some point, that is something that some folks need to look into, maybe us.
Very interesting. Different line of work. But another, I imagine
I like that bibliographic approach. Like that, I think that complements us very well.
Forensic historian analysis. It's good stuff. I guess, we still have to make a defense of poetry part 3. I don't think we ever even finished going through the essay. Good stuff though. But we to continue moving on here, I guess, do we have a state of the theory? Since we kind of came on sort of, real
Guns
loosey,
a-blazing.
yeah, real loosey goosey guns ablazing. Even in our first video, obviously kind of group theorists lightly for the most part, and
Yeah.
but I think a lot of people will be like, oh, y'all are the Sydney guys, and we kind of are in a sense that just like to see more. More people applying some magnifying glasses, either checking ourselves,
Yeah, like,
or
I don't know, he's just
or
such
confirming it.
He's such a huge figure in the literary scene that it's absurd the lack of connection, both in academic and authorship question circles, the lack of connection between Sidney to Shakespeare. Like, it's absurd how little that's looked into and what that means. And like the few authors that do end up writing about it, that's their first thing they point out. Like we pointed that out in I've already forgot his name. Dang it. In Homeboy Sidney's defensive poetry monograph. Homeboy will be his name until I remember it. All these guys are all named Allen, and it confuses me. Or Alden, or
yeah, you're right. Yeah, there are a few of them. I was like Alden and Alden.
In his monograph, he says, like, guys, I think it's kind of weird that nobody's asked this, what's the connection between them, because Shakespeare has this great dramatic output, and the main critical text over...
Was that in our Shakespeare in Arcadia video that he was just like, this has not been acknowledged, and here's a defensive poetry snippet, and then boom, here it is, basically like reworked in a Shakespeare piece essentially.
Yes. And
I forget who that was.
All these names. It's not Alan Hager. It's a different guy. But Alan Hager's another Sydney scholar.
We'll look it up in 2 seconds. But either way. But state of the theory.
We have like gone down the Sydney rabbit hole, and it's like, are they still group theorists? They just seem to only talk about Sydney. No, totally still group theorists. At the moment, what I'm struggling with is how to connect Oxford to the rest of the group. If we want to go with an Oxfordian theory, then this is some kind of scriptorum that Oxford puts together.
Alwyn Thaler. Yes. So it wasn't Alwyn.
Yeah. So yeah.
Because different.
Not Alden Brooks. Not Alan Hager, but
or the guy who did who's the guy who did the Dyer's Hand? Isn't he also another?
So there's the Dyer's Hand is in a book of essays on Shakespeare by famous poet W.H. Auden.
That's how
there's also the Dyer's Hand, where it's an authorship questioning book, and that is by a man named Alden Brooks.
Yes, yeah.
So Alden, Auden, Alwyn, and Allen.
Yeah, no good.
It's tough. It's a whole nother like meta thing.
It's probably a Stratfordian skullduggery.
So, how do we reconcile Oxfordian understanding with where we're going with this Philip Sidney stuff? Because we tried to really connect the two. I dug through a bunch of poems, a bunch of stuff, and I said, dude, this is one that's listed as an Oxford poem. It's by De Vere. That's what says it on the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship site. And I read it over, and it's like, dude, this is talking about Philip Sidney, like capital L love, like, and then it's got all these other kind of allegorical kind of things set into it, and going off to the wood to
after leaving court.
Yeah, leaving court from being spurned by fortune, like. Come on, man. This is about Oxford and Sidney, like both getting kicked out of court because they pissed off the Queen, and they're going off to Wilton to write or something. This is awesome. I've got it. Smoking gun here. But no, it turns out that is pointed out by some of our better commenters and some of the sharper Oxfordians. That may not be an Oxford poem, despite what the Shakespeare Oxford Fellowship site has on there, which it does have a little asterisk under it. Underneath it says, Stephen May said this is not an Oxford poem. But we still included it on our website just in case. But yeah, that
or a sparrow.
Thank you. Megliora Sparrow, which means I hope for better things.
By Folk.
Yeah, it's by Folk Gravel.
A.K.A. Sidney's best friend.
Yeah.
And who somehow mysteriously ends up with some of Sidney's stuff after death or whatever.
Yeah, he has the reworked version of the Arcadia. Yeah. So, yeah, all of a sudden, like, it was this weird thing, and we said it in another video that, like, I was so glad that it was folk, because that meant that my reading was right, but, like, I'm still at a total loss as to where and how Oxford and this Sidney circle reconcile or reunite, or where they overlap, or anything, because per Folk Gravel's own narrative and other sort of evidence, it seems that those two dudes hate each other, that there's no reconciling them, that, like, and furthermore, it just kind of seems that Oxford doesn't have a circle of aristocrats. Oxford can only have circles of underlings.
Not peers quite the same way. He kind of seems a little
struggles with his peers.
Isolated.
He is buddies with his peers, and then he is at fiery, hot odds against, like, his peers, that we end up having, you know, his best friends are his cousins, and then, like, they're doing some secret group together. They're maybe gonna start, you know, putting forth more Catholic ideas to try and, you know, bring back some of these old Catholic great things from, you know, all the way back in the olden days with William the Conqueror and stuff. We got to bring back, you know, Rome. We went to Italy. We gotta show people what civilization is. It's from the church. And like, not but a few years later, he's totally like, no, my cousin said that. I never said that. They're liars and they're cheapskates, and I hate them and I want them to die. And it's like, all right, dude. Okay. And, like, that's almost like literally the Queen's reaction, that, like, she's incredibly unhappy with Oxford, and this is why he gets in trouble for one of the first times in the 80s, that she's incredibly unhappy with Oxford, not because he may have been part of some Catholic plot, but she's just incredibly unhappy that, like, he had to make it into a thing where people start accusing each other, and it's public, and it's now this big, you know, public uproar that, like, if he'd have just shut up and just secretly plotted against the government, she would have probably been happier about it. And, like, that's so weird. But, like, it just shows the kind of person that De Vere is. And I'm not saying that doesn't mean he's not capable of writing Shakespeare, but I do think that it's hard to understand how he interacts with all these other aristocrats. Like, Daniel Cowan did an excellent job, a.k.a. 6 Days Theater, a.k.a. Alacrities, did a great job showing me that, like, look, we do know that Walter Raleigh sort of sticks his nose out for Oxford in the late 80s, when Oxford is finally coming out of the doghouse from Elizabeth after basically being in the doghouse for, like, the better part of a decade. And that Raleigh may have had super influence doing that and wrote letters to her and kind of, you know, appeased it. But, like, even then, we don't say, when we talk about the School of Night and Walter Raleigh and his gang, does De Vere get mentioned?
Right.
Like,
no, right.
And, like, do Oxfordians mention that?
No.
So, like, and no wonder Oxfordians want to pitch the solo genius. Like, who is he connected to? Who does like him? Who is wanting to keep him around? And so, they say Henry Wriothesley, but all they really have is the marriage connection. That's it, and that didn't even work out.
Right. Does that not go way against the theory again?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And if anything, it would probably make more sense to William Stanley, the guy that does end up marrying her. But I don't even see, like, you know, kind of maybe the same way that some Baconians say, oh, it's not just Bacon, it's also Bacon and Neville. Or that, it's not just Bacon, it's also Bacon and his brother. Or it's not just Bacon, it's Bacon and Mary Sidney. There's several iterations of it. Maybe we used to get that with early Oxfordian theory, circa 1920, 30, 40 something, but you don't get that anymore. And, like, I just wondered, why not? Like, why has that gone away? Why not say Oxford is writing this with a son-in-law, William Stanley? You know? And that's how they are able to use William Stanley's initials, WS, and use the name William, and, like, why not pitch that? And, like, it's not hard, because, like, William Stanley's been documented as being an idiot, and so it's like, you can still claim that De Vere's all the good stuff. Like, you can still have your cake and eat it too. Like, why not? So I don't know. I still don't know how to situate Oxford. That said, Oxford aside.
Yeah, and that's why when you first find Oxford, when you start diving down it, at least I'm still, kind of coming from a layman's point of view. But yeah, when you first stumble out and it's like, hey, here's a guy who looks like he's connected to the theater scene. Wow, that kind of just fits the bio a lot more. Oh, wow, but we only have he wrote like an introduction or something for a piece in Latin.
We have the preface,
so you can't
prefatory material to Castiglione's Courtier translation.
And so, but we can't assume that he's written Shakespeare and start comparing that against itself. Where unlike Philip Sidney, where we do have some of his writings, maybe we have some of Oxford's poems too, and whatnot. And this is also where it could get even harder, where we've shown, callbacks between Philip and De Vere to one another,
right?
Which could also muddy the waters for trying to suss any of this stuff out. But yeah, it's nice being able to read a Philip Sidney thing, see his argument, see the layers of how he can really bury some of this stuff, and then being like, oh wow, I can kind of see that in Shakespeare because look, I can actually read it, rather than being like, well, he must have written Shakespeare, and look, Shakespeare compares to Shakespeare, and I'm being obviously a little facetious with it.
Right.
But I don't know, it's nice having Philip Sidney's actual words and stuff to compare to.
I think, one of the reasons that I'm maybe attracted to doing the Philip Sidney theory in the first place is just that, there is a wealth of stuff to actually look at and compare. And, I know a lot of people have maybe tried to make the argument that it's so stylistically divergent that it can't be the same, but, here's the thing, that, they're saying that because it's they're making the assumption that if I'm pitching Philip Sidney, that he must be Philip Sidney and Shakespeare at the same time, a la pre-86, and that those are two stylistically different. But for me, it's no, if we get past the idea that he dies in 86, why can't there be a stylistic development into something like Shakespeare, the same way we say with Marlowe into Shakespeare, the same way that I think some should start saying Lyly into Shakespeare.
And if anything, still, the traces of the ideas themselves, what do these guys what do they actually believe? What are the points that they're driving home? What stuff are they, what logic and rhetoric are they applying?
Not just some basic little allegorical situation where, we know this happened, and hey, look, it's in the, not just
a trope or something, right?
But actual,
belief.
Psychological, philosophical belief that is embedded in their life experience, and so that's been I asked this to Ron Roffel, who's an Oxfordian YouTuber. Shout out to Ron. Y'all should go check him out. He's got a lot of good videos. He's very open to conversation. He's definitely convinced his theory's right, but he's not ever mean if you think something way different, or if you don't even like what he says. He'll be very, very nice to you. And so he has a video on Darrogance, actually, but he has several videos. But one of his recent videos, I was because he was spotting all this De Vere stuff, but once again it was so many numbers and so many little tongue-in-cheek kind of this thing would be on a heraldic symbol, or this thing would be here, and but the passage itself and what the thematic intent of the passage was, both from Ron and the academics that he was sort of undercutting, still seemed super opaque and obscure to me. I still didn't know what the poem was trying to say. And so what is all of this decoding doing for me for the poem and the reading? And without some sort of way to decode that poem, it was kind of silly nonsense. So what difference is it without some understructure or some philosophy to decode this? And not just ciphers, not just, pointing out tropes or metaphors, but actual philosophical understanding are we getting out of this? And to circle back to the Ronald Laval essay on Sidney's defense of poetry, we're going to see that's Sidney's thing. The philosophical understanding needs to be in the thing. You can spot Sidney based on the philosophy.
And he says that in Defense of Poetry about how to kind of build it up from the bottom up, or from top down, or from inside out, or something like that. With the structure of the piece itself, and
he has a whole thing on what philosophers are good and not good at, and he, basically says that poets are better than philosophers, but then he goes and points out all the most famous philosophers were as good as poets. Yeah. And like that's him saying, I'm being a poet and a philosopher myself.
I'm being Nietzsche.
But all that to say that I still don't quite understand what the Oxfordian philosophy is.
Can I go on a quick tangent here? Only because there's a YouTube channel that I like a lot, because he talks a lot about Cormac McCarthy and Pynchon and the like. It's called Right Conscious, and he does say his mission is to heighten the reading level of everyone out there. Like, hey guys, let's start talking about some deep books. Let's get off the the lowbrow entertainment and media. Hey, if you want if we want to get some real deep stuff, we got to keep talking about it. So he's like, I may not be a writer, or I may not be the one to do that, to give us the next one, but maybe I can touch the next guy to do that or whatever. But I have like mentioned, of course, like some Philip Sidney in some video or whatever. Like, oh man, yeah, you gotta some of these ideas, because I think he was talking about Renaissance ideas, and I'm just connecting it, a lot of those dots. But then there was a video where, in the same video, he talked about how he didn't like some of those Renaissance guys, he said specifically like Shakespeare and John Donne, which I thought was kind of funny, because I was like, dude, some of the John Donne stuff like kind of like blows my mind. I'm like, dude, this is gnarly. Like, but he was like, oh yeah, those guys were those guys ruined writing, or he kind of said something along those lines. I'm maybe paraphrasing here, but then later on he was using some great example that he liked from Cormac McCarthy, but then in the middle of the Cormac McCarthy, it used the mind's eye, looking through a glass darkly setup. Yeah. It was like the exact like phrase or whatever, and it's like those dudes are obviously reading Shakespeare and then like reapplying it here, so like I don't know, just the irony of some of that stuff, and just and then seeing a Philip Sidney sort of connection between all those later authors that we've sort of poured out, from Dickens naming Great Expectations, or a Philip Marlowe maybe connection with the Raymond Chandler stuff. Like I don't know, it seems like this is a kind of a thing we've Chambers, R.W. Chambers. We found he's talked about the Shakespeare authorship series. We found
the Yellow King himself, ladies.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember we did that live. I was like, hey, is this that Chambers? And you're like, nah, yeah. And
yeah.
It's, crap. Yeah, we are in Carcosa land. We joke about that all the time, but true.
The guy that didn't invent Carcosa. That's Ambrose Bierce, which I'm gonna go out on a limb and just say Ambrose Bierce probably doubts it too. He's buddies with Twain.
There you go.
And Ambrose Bierce himself has a weird Thomas Nash-like ending to his life. Just goes to Mexico and disappears. Which, shout out. Which, I'll connect this back. I only know that because, you know what Oakley Hall's like last set of novels are all about? He has like a detective noir series where it's got a recurring main character, and it's literally Ambrose Bierce.
Oh, really? Oh,
And it's his days in Mexico.
Really?
Yeah.
Dude, that's nuts. I mean, and here's to go back to Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens kind of has like a weird sort of ending to his life, because he doesn't finish his last book or whatever. I forget the name of it, but there's a bunch of like Freemasonic sort of motifs and kind of stuff in there. It's another murder mystery as well. So yeah, it's all kind of swirling around here. Time is a flat circle.
Yeah, well, Dickens himself is a doubter.
One of these podcasts, we should just come on here dressed like Rust and Marty.
Yeah, Rust and Marty, man.
We'll just both be Rust.
You were supposed to be Marty. No, you were supposed to be Marty.
You'll be young Rust, and I'll be like old Rust or something. Oh my God.
Yeah, I'll be Ray Velcoro from season 2. Everyone will get that reference.
Oh my God.
Actually, I think Ray Velcoro is probably still a better character than any from season 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Season 3 is like better structured and better written, but I think Ray's actually a better character than any of the rest.
Dude, yeah, he's kind of quotable.
He's the only thing that carried season 2, honestly. Yeah. Yeah, I won't quote Ray's quote here.
Yeah, but
check out the end of episode 1, season 2. Yeah.
Aspen? That's a boy's name?
Yeah, my God. That was good. That was good stuff. Let me see. What else you got?
Sultron says, what are the names that you guys believe Sidney may have used? I believe Samuel Daniel was the main one. I mentioned you guys idea about Sidney not dying to the host of the Ghost of Bacon. I watched that one podcast. I wondered if Sir William Alexander could have been a name he used. I'm not sure.
I don't
if
know
the timeline
how
works.
to work over the William Alexander stuff. Like I'm
super interested in.
Oh my god, it's weird. William Alexander's obsessed with Philip Sidney. If he's not Philip Sidney, he like does the thing that Chapman does with Marlowe, where Chapman like goes and finishes Marlowe's Hero and Leander poem and just kind of picks up the School of Nighty kind of feel from Marlowe. That's a Chapman. Like William Alexander like tries to finish Arcadia and writes dozens of sonnets that are all kind of almost like bad Sidney, but it's still like Philip Sidney. And like maybe it's an old drunk Sidney, or maybe it's like them republishing his juvenile works or something. But like you go look up a picture of William Alexander and it looks like an old drunk bearded Sidney. Like
we'll do it live. I'll see if I can find him. I mean, it's kind of funny if his name is
like,
William Alexander.
Especially like if you put a picture of Samuel Daniel in between them, it's like, oh wait a second. But to be fair, almost all these people kind of look like that, and almost all these people are kind of related.
This one?
Yeah.
Oh my god, dude, that's too funny.
And like,
especially if we compare it to like a Samuel Daniel portrait too. Do Philip Sidney up through Samuel Daniel. Looks a lot like Samuel Daniel with him too, right? Here, I'll do it.
Like, yeah, if Samuel Daniel just gets a little older, his nose gets a little longer. I know his nose looks a little more bent in that picture, but look, I mean, even Alexander's a little more bent. It's a little longer, but
yeah, it's just like he grew the beard out a little bit. I don't know. The hair kind of. If we look up, we got another Sidney here.
But yeah, like if you think of this, some of the Sidneys with where he's got the mustache and the goatee, and the hair curling out, like you can kind of see that one.
Sidney game.
And so I guess this would be like,
what is this? Oh no. This is gonna be a rabbit hole.
Oh no, the Sir Philip Sidney game.
We did. We heard about this.
Yes, it's based on him doing the take my armor, take my water, because I don't need it sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's an economic model.
Wait, is this related to like a Nash equilibria maybe?
Wait, John Maynard Smith? Is that a different guy than John Maynard Keynes? Oh boy, what a name! He's like, is he related to both Adam Smith and John Maynard Keynes? He's like the scion.
Yeah.
The messiah of
the
British
Kwisatz
economic theory, yeah. But yeah, sorry, let's not go down that rabbit hole. But yeah, so I've read a fair amount of Alexander's sonnets, and that's about all I've gotten into. But like, I remember I text Brady. This was maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, but I texted him some pictures of Alexander of William Alexander. I'm like, bro, could this be like? I'm not saying it is, but like, could this possibly be like? And Brady's like, I don't know, like maybe, like. Philip Sidney's pictures themselves aren't so consistent because people back then aren't the greatest artists or painters, but I think it's all within kind of the same margin of error, you know? But the problem is that, like, that's not just faking the identity of some nobody servant where you can just, you know, maybe fake 1 or 2 old documents and sign a few old things and, oh, boom presto, we have his name on a ledger at Oxford, he's a real person, like, no, this is an actual guy with a heraldic family and all that sort of stuff. So, like, I don't know how exactly that works. Also, like, the same way that Samuel Daniel's, like, you know, like 5-10 years younger than Sidney, Alexander's even younger than Daniel. Like, we're moving farther and farther down the timeline here, and it gets a little difficult to explain, but like I think what's equally difficult to explain is like William Alexander's bizarre fixation on Philip Sidney, and also William Alexander is super important to who? King James.
Yeah.
He's the personal secretary, so he writes down everything for King James.
We know Daniel's also close to James, right?
Oh, yeah.
Samuel Daniel is. Yeah.
And do you know who was actually pen pals with King James and one of the people that wrote him more than anybody else?
Who?
You want to guess? It's a chick.
Oh, is it Mary?
It's a good guess.
Is it Penelope?
It's Penelope Devereux.
Yeah, Penelope Devereux.
And so why would she be writing to the king so much? Well, if the secretary of the king is the dude maybe penning some of the notes for him, like, and that's Philip Sidney. Doom, I got my Penelope Philip. We did it again. But like, I don't know. I have no idea how you would fake something like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I do like how the Wikipedia though does have a little citation here that he was an active Freemason early in. Yeah, I'm surprised that it goes back, but it links to some essay here: Conspiratorial Networks in the North, a review of Jacobite and Hanoverian Freemasons in Scandinavia and Russia.
And we do know with the Muscovy Company that there's all sorts of stuff connecting back to Sidney through that. And if
we talked
William
about all
Alexander's
that,
got his hands in the same thing, like there's something.
Yeah, go back to the John D.
Here. Yeah,
the John D. Sidney magic or the Muse and the Magician of the Muse.
Yeah, the Magus,
Magus of the Muse.
Yep.
And so, yeah, dude, there's probably. We read that a while ago, and I'm like, dude, there's probably stuff that we read over that I don't remember anymore.
I've been basically to long story short, Soltron. I've been trying to pay attention to Jake Roberts over there, and somebody else was another Baconian. One of our comments recently was suggesting a few others for me to check out, and also one of my favorite. He's maybe not quite so deep dive academic, but he's fantastic YouTuber. One of my favorites that got me into this was Jonah Freeman.
Yeah.
And he hadn't posted forever, and recently in the last few months he started posting again after like a year or so hiatus. So welcome back, Jonah. Keep posting. I want more Baconians to maybe look at Sidney. There's so much connection between Bacon and Sidney. Like, we know that they're buddies. We know they're part of the Leicester Circle. They both joined Parliament basically at the same time. It seems like that Bacon is basically a protege of Sidney, and Sidney's a protege of Dyer, and they're all just down the line proteges of what is the Caesar of England, Robert Leicester. That's how I would put it. And all these guys are just potential next emperors.
Yeah, all getting their personal private tutorship from John D. himself, and so it's like
a
lot of people like
to
using
visit the Cecil Salon.
Yeah. Once again, I always like the Frances Yates. She's a sleeper Sidneyan, where I read some of those lines, and she's like, one could imagine Sidney walking down, the rows and rows of books at John Dee's house, and that he would have had, firsthand, the pristine or the best translations and best original sources for pretty much anything you could ever read of,
And that's the thing is that I think, like you say, like Yates is obsessed with several of these people. But she loves Florio, she loves Bacon, she loves John Dee. But I think all of them are exhibiting what is Sidney's ideas. And so I do want to say that maybe some of these Baconians are getting it a little twisted by saying, Bacon wrote Sidney. No, I think that maybe...
It's just the next phase.
He's heir to Sidney's throne. And maybe Sidney does die in 86 and Bacon takes... Maybe. But Bacon, Mary Sidney, any of these people that you want to pitch, guess what their connection is to each other, and guess who comes before them.
Yes, exactly. And that's where, we kind of still like to make most of the stress is that, just how integral Philip Sidney is to the whole thing.
Right. And, if we just, literally look at some of the favorite candidates right now, their connection to each other can go through Sidney and Leicester. And so who are the favorites right now? Oxford, who is that? That's Sidney's rival. Bacon, that's Sidney's protege. Christopher Marlowe, that was a page in Sidney's household. Mary Sidney, that's Sidney's sister. Henry Neville, seemingly another protege of Sidney, who is the cousin of Bacon. Let's see, who else do we got? Thomas North. Who is Thomas North? He writes for Sidney's uncle's company and probably writes with Sidney. John Florio. He's supposed to be Sidney's buddy, and he's working and editing Sidney's stuff. Come on, give me another candidate. Seriously, it's a Sidney person. It's all all, and I know that we could technically try and frame this for anybody because they're all connected to each other. You could try and put any of them in the center technically, but I think the timeline sort of says that you have to put Sidney in there because he's older. If we put Mary or Bacon in as the center of the whole thing, we can't explain how this comes out of the 80s. We can't explain how this comes from Spencer. We can't explain how this comes from Gascon. We can't explain how this comes from a hundred sundry flowers. Like, we need to explain how those things come about. We need to explain who the ones that are learning from people like Sackville and Hatton, right? Who's the one that gets to watch Tancred and Gismond when it comes out in 1563? Who's watching that as a little kid? Because it's not Bacon or Mary. They're infants if not born. So we need to know that. And I think Oxford, Sidney, Greville, Dyer, Raleigh, Hatton, those 40s and 50s guys are what we need to link to get to Sidney and Bacon. And sure, I think they're incredibly important, but like this is, at some point, this is a big group thing where we have anonymity of aristocratic writers, poets, playwrights over several decades, and it's, it becomes its own kind of trope or convention itself, because that's how you formally and ritually kind of relate to the Queen and the Crown, because so many of these things are being done for the Crown, and they all start as masks or plays to put on for Elizabeth when she visits your house, and then if you put that on and do that, you can take that and make a little touring company, and you do that enough, you have a little repertoire. And so, or you can give it off to other people, and who give it off to other people. But if you're trying to put on something for the Queen that's the best stuff, are you gonna go hire just any old hackwit? You can go hire some guy at the university that may be the best, but if he screws you over, you have to fucking kill him, And
the thing is that, yeah, it's and that's all well and good that people can go do their little art projects and, go get your side money, but here, once again, you have Philip Sidney and DOP being dude, this is we could make this a national tool, essentially, here's, look at all these people in, Germany, essentially, and they have all these big nationalistic hoorah stuff that they all chant and know together,
right.
God bless America or whatever, but
right.
Whatever equivalent of that time. And look at the Spanish, they have all these cool little quips that they can just pull out from these modern novels, and everyone on the streets is kind of repeating the same stuff. They're all sharing the same memes, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Everyone's operating on the same wavelength,
Absolutely.
And so that's what he literally talks about, and why you want to get some of that stuff kind of into your national blood veins.
And one we need to look at and do a video on at some point is Puttenham's Art of Poesy, which is almost like a follow-up and maybe a longer version, and it goes a little more into which rhetorical devices and kind of almost gives us a rhetoric textbook of the time. And it's funny, some of their terms don't match up with the Greek terms, and Puttenham has his own made-up terms, and but Puttenham pretty much lines up pretty much exactly with Sidney, and kind of same way that Mears lines up exactly with Sidney. And in fact, you could probably triangulate the same phrases between the three, and that's why you have some people out there that say, Bacon wrote all three, or Oxford wrote all three. And if we wanted to, we could say Sidney wrote all three, and maybe there are some days that I do want to say that. I don't want to say that every day or all day. Let me see. Other current state of the theory stuff. We went really hard into Dyer for a while there. I kind of put him down. I'm going to come back to Dyer. I'm going to come back to Drayton. But I was watching one of Mariana's older videos the other day on her Florio channel, and it was over Phaeton's sonnet to his buddy Florio. And it's one in the opening of Second Fruits, translation poetry collection from 1591, sort of sequel to First Fruits 13 years later. But that Phaeton sonnet, people have been trying to speculate who the heck could it be. And in her video, she was going over some of the favorite candidates, and Samuel Daniel was one. Another candidate was Christopher Marlowe. Another candidate was William Shakespeare. and then another candidate was Edmund Spenser, and it's like a who's who of fake names, you know, like who are the fakest people of the era, and like I don't know if those are the people writing to John Florio. Just saying, I'll let you do the math, but I guess my point being, I didn't think that it was stylistically similar to Samuel Daniel. I think there's reasons that I have personally that I won't state right here that I think that you're not going to get too much of Samuel Daniel and Florio writing to each other or praising to each other. I think it's somebody else that would maybe be more likely to praise Daniel himself or praise Florio himself. So who might that be? Maybe some figures like Walter Raleigh or something like that. But to me, it read like Edward Dyer. It read like those little Richard Barnfield poems. It read like some of the Drayton stuff, like some of the Shakespeare stuff, some of the Marlowe stuff, where it's all pastoral, and it's like in springtime, and we'll all be in fields, and everything will be pleasant, and everything's nice, and
I guess I could see how they write. Why they would say Edmund Spenser, right?
Right, exactly, and I would probably say, like, if we think that Sidney is Spenser, I don't think Sidney has the capability to do all the output of Spenser and the output of blah, 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 and the output of... Like, at some point, these are all a bunch of different little group projects, little team projects.
Right.
If Sidney is part of Spenser, so is Edward Dyer. And so, like, all four of those names that they listed, I'm sure Edward Dyer, I'm not sure, but I would like to say Edward Dyer and Philip Sidney and others, too, have hands in all those people. But I was just saying, it's got to be Edward Dyer. Doesn't have to be, but that's who I think. But I don't think many people are maybe pitching that. But there is documentation that Edward Dyer is buddies with Florio and that he's in the same Leicester circle as Florio, and he should still totally be around by 1591 when this Phaeton Sonnet's coming out. But the whole reason I wanted to pitch Edward Dyer was that her video started out by saying that, like, this Phaeton Sonnet's super important because it kind of predicates or anticipates sonnets in a fashion, because at the point that's printed, Astrophil Stella has not been printed, Delia has not been printed, none of our famous sonnet sequences have been printed, and she was almost saying, like, it's super avant-garde. This person already knew that sonnets were going to be a cool big thing. Which is true, but I just wanted to maybe further explain that to maybe make sure that that's not misconstrued, because that is not the first sonnet in England. Like, you can go back like almost 100 years back with Wyatt and Henry Howard and that crowd back in King Henry times. They're writing sonnets. Sonnets are, they've been a thing. They know how sonnets work and where they come from. But there's sort of a sonnet revival that happens in the 80s and 90s where they get picked up again, and it's specifically the Petrarchan sonnet. So Petrarch. And it's like not just the Petrarchan sonnet, but the sonnet sequence, which is a Petrarch thing. And so it's all about Laura, which is the sonnet sequence by Petrarch. And so all the famous sonnet sequences that we could name all follow tropes and structures of Laura. And, like, all the sonnet sequences line up to this kind of cohesive sort of thematic narrative, and that they're all about the sonnet poeteer in opposition to his unrequited lover, which has platonic ideas enwrapped in it, and, like, that's all Petrarch. And so, like, I think that's what she's getting at, because Wyatt and Howard, all their stuff isn't totally Petrarchan like that, and so I think she's sort of saying that, like, Phaeton's sort of maybe doing that a little bit in this sonnet with Florio, and that, like, this is still coming out and before those things are printed, so it still knows that it's this cutting edge thing, that there's going to be this big move, but, like, at the same time, like, well, no, Astrophil Stella is getting printed because it's been passed around for so long over the 80s in manuscript. We know that Sir Edward Dymoke has his own manuscript, and maybe the original manuscript, and Edward Dymoke is supposed to be buddies with Florio. And so it's like, whoever's Phaeton isn't like, oh, I wrote the first sonnet. Whoever's Phaeton is, like, reading Philip Sidney sonnets and reading Samuel Daniels sonnets as Samuel Daniels writing, because even though Delia doesn't come out in full till 93 and comes out partially in the 91 Astrophil first printing that wasn't supposed to be printed, there's already a whole set of sonnets. So, like, whoever wrote Phaeton only wrote one sonnet. Whoever wrote Delia wrote 30 or 40 sonnets by 91. So, probably whoever wrote Phaeton, if they're not Samuel Daniel, has already read and seen Samuel Daniel writing sonnets. Has already seen people working on putting together Astrophil and Estella's printing. So, whoever is Phaeton is privy to the other stuff that's being printed and written about to put out. And it just, to me, makes sense that it would be someone like a Florio or a Royden or a Greville or a Dyer, somebody that's in this tight little Sidney Lester circle that's wrapped up in the poetry output of Philip Sidney.
Yeah.
And stylistically, it just seems so close to me. Because this is the same year that those exact guys are working on what? The Arcadia. And so it's like, it seems, yeah.
Yeah, the way that the Arcadia, its whole production and the stuff between Mary and Greville and Dymoke and all the different ones, dude, this is such a bizarre chain of events, and yeah, and then, I don't know, it's so weird. And like, how does a mainstream academic sort of look at this and just extrapolate all that information? Just I don't know. It's just interesting drama, I guess, on the surface. But then also, from a more paranoid kind of viewpoint, it's like, yeah, what's really going on with all this stuff?
Oh, that's awesome. Jake gets to retire. I'm super jealous. In fact, Jake needs to shoot me an email, and I'll see if we can trade places. He can take my teaching job, and I'll retire. I doubt Jake would do that. But congrats to Jake. That's awesome. I need to go post a comment about that. That's too cool. And yeah, I'm actually able to do this live stream today because I had today off from school. Thank goodness. Tomorrow is my students' gigantic, big, standardized test that's so darn important to everybody in the 21st century and definitely the state of Texas. So we'll see if I get to keep my job or not. No, I'm kidding. It won't be that bad. I'm sure my students will do fine. If any of them accidentally stumble on this live stream, guys, good luck. Do your best. Have fun.
Do your homework now.
And go to bed soon. I got to do the same myself.
It's funny.
Let's see. Any last notes or thoughts? I wanted to talk about the Apocrypha. I won't talk about it too long here. But if you don't have a copy of this book, do yourself a favor and get a copy of The Disputed Plays of William Shakespeare. It's by Hawthorne Publishing Company or Printing Press, Hawthorne Books Inc. But it is edited with commentary by William Kozlenko. It is from 1974. I don't love Kozlenko's commentary. I do love Kozlenko's commentary because it's fun and silly, but I don't always agree with it or appreciate maybe the academic veracity of it, because he's definitely got some old school dad gene bias, and like any play in here that kind of questions God or the church, he's like, no way that could be Shakespeare. But then there's there's other plays that like don't really even stylistically read like Shakespeare in here, and he's like, I think it's Shakespeare, and it's just because it has this nice little Puritan like morals, and he's a big believer that Shakespeare himself is a Catholic and kind of states it so factually, and I don't know that that's still accepted anymore. But that said, the list of plays that it has in here, and you can go find this cheap. I got this for like $5 on Abe Books or Thrift Books or one of those sites. But it's got King Edward III, Arden of Faversham, Merry Devil of Edmonton, Yorkshire Tragedy, Locrine, Musidorus, London Prodigal, The Puritan, aka The Widow of Watling Street, The Life and Death of Thomas, Lord of Cromwell, The Birth of Merlin, or The Child Hath Found His Father, and the first part of Sir John Oldcastle. These are all plays that have been printed as by William Shakespeare. Some of these in the third folio, a few others in their own quarto printings, but every one of these printed as Shakespeare at some point pretty soon after Shakespeare. But we don't really consider these Shakespeare. They didn't get the same sort of treatment that Pericles and Two Noble Kinsmen got, where people said, you know what, yeah, keep it in Shakespeare. It's in the canon. For the most part, none of these are accepted in the canon. I think Edward III's slowly making its way into the canon, and it will be, and I think that's totally fine. Like, I don't want to restrict the canon to the first folio, or the arbitrary other two that aren't in the first folio. Like, I think King Edward III reads as much like any play in the Shakespeare canon as any other one. And some of these others, there's good reason to think that too. But I just wanted to really quickly rifle through who we do consider these plays by, because at some point, all these were considered by Shakespeare at one point or another. And so just notice the variety of names here. So King Edward III, that's now considered, for the most part, is by Thomas Kyd and William Shakespeare, maybe in tandem. There's other people that think other names and disagree, but that's maybe the favorite. Arden of Faversham is similar. It's Thomas Kyd and Thomas Watson. But not everybody agrees, and there could be other names that we could put on it. Mary Devil of Edmonton. Decker's name has been attached to that a lot, but Decker writes so many plays with other people that there could be other people in that as well. Yorkshire Tragedy. That's one that was definitely put as by Shakespeare for a while, because it was printed as by W.S., and some people have tried to put forward Whitmore Smith and that kind of thing. But now it is accepted as by Thomas Middleton, maybe with some help from George Wilkins. And notice, other than Thomas Kyd's name, none of these names have repeated. And a lot of these names are from way different times. Thomas Watson's writing in the 80s. Thomas Middleton is writing in the 1600s. There's almost an entire decade gap between them. And yet, some of these plays, we still can't even date. People date them as early as the late 80s and as late as the 1600s, or even 16 teens, or even 1620s. So let's see. Locrine, that is now the favorite is Green, though there are definitely others that people attribute that to. Musidorus, I'm going to come back to Musidorus. I'm going to end on that. London Prodigal, no clue. Nobody has any idea who the heck wrote London Prodigal. You could put any name, any name from the era, just put it on there. Somebody's probably guessed that. Haywood, yeah, sure, could be. Webster, yeah, maybe. Could be Lyly, sure. Could it be Marlowe? Yeah, it talks all about Deptford. Could it be Shakespeare? Yeah, that's why it's in here. Could it be Middleton? Why not? Literally anybody. Drayton, Decker, anybody. And so people don't know. They don't know. London Prodigal has some weirdness to it. I was telling Brady over the phone some of the maybe allegorical readings you could make of the play based on just basic character analysis, just their names and their character arcs. For instance, the main character is Matthew Flowerdale. Is Flowerdale maybe a play on what's maybe one specific flower, maybe a rose? And what's a dale, a little meadow or a lea? So could Flowerdale be a play on a rose lea? Oh, Henry Roseley? Interesting, because it's all about the main character, Flowerdale, is getting married to, or he wants to get married to one of the 3 daughters of this rich dude named Lancelot Spurcock, which if you invert Spurcock to Cockspur, that's an exact rhyme with Shockspur. And so, wait a second. Rosley getting married to the daughter of De Vere. Oh, wait, that makes sense. But, maybe Flowerdale is, a play on some of these names, some of these dudes making the Arcadia. 2 of the main guys that are editors of the Arcadia are Matthew Royden and John Florio. So, Matthew is the first name of the character. Flowerdale's last name, Florio Flower. Maybe there's something there. I don't know. And there's all sorts of other stuff in London Prodigal that we could read further into, but I'll continue. There's also The Puritan, or The Widow of Watling Street. Sorry, I got it mixed up earlier when I said Wentworth Smith was the writer of Yorkshire Tragedy. Yorkshire Tragedy is either Wilkins or Middleton. The Puritan is the one with W.S. on it, and that was the one that was attributed as Wentworth Smith for the longest time, but now we say, yes, it's Middleton. Must be Middleton. Similar in style to Yorkshire Tragedy. It's a little simpler than Shakespeare. It's a little more stilted, but the character development's very important. Psychology is important. Blah blah blah. We got Life and Death of Thomas Lord Cromwell. Who knows? Could be anybody. Seen Decker, seen Drayton, seen blah 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 blah. A lot of them. Merlin, Birth of Merlin. We talked about this in our last live stream, but yeah, everybody knows it's the comic parts are by William Raleigh, but who's writing the serious parts? Who knows? And then we also have first part of Sir John Oldcastle. We do know who wrote that. It's in Henslow's diary. Thank God we have Henslow's diary, but none of them are Shakespeare. One of them does include Michael Drayton, who seems to have a bizarre amount of overlap with Shakespeare, but yet we have almost nothing in Michael Drayton's printed from him, at least dramatic output. So, like, that said, as we can see on this page here, there's others, too, that aren't included in here. We have Edmund Ironside, Sir Thomas More, Thomas of Woodstock, Spanish Tragedy, kids' Spanish Tragedy, An Act to No Knave, one of the famous comedies of the era.
I like that title a lot.
Yeah, everybody likes that title.
I think I need to steal that for like an adventure module for the Navy system. Shut up.
And so, all right, let me come back to Musidorus. Musidorus is one that people have attributed to several people. Could be Peel, could be Green, could be Lyly, could be Drayton, could be what's another one that I have here? I can't read what that one says, but it could be somebody else too. But Musidorus, what is that play about? Well, it's largely based off of. And let me start off before even I say what it's about. Let me ask you this: does anybody know what the most successful play of the era was as far as printing goes? So not as far as performance box office, but as far as printing editions. What is the most printed play of the century in the 1600s? It's Musidorus. Musidorus is printed 16 or 17 editions. 17 over 100 years, 16 over, 70 years? It is the most widely printed play of the time. It is wildly successful. It is as successful as Hamlet, as successful as Tamburlaine, as successful as Jew of Malta, you name it. All those other plays that we hold so important, near and dear, and that you read in class. Those plays. This is bigger. And this isn't just some lowbrow Marvel crap that's sold to the rabble. This is super highfalutin, based off of Philip Sidney's. Yeah,
going back to there's only so many people in the printing game, therefore there's also probably only a subset of only some people that are able to read stuff that's printed, right. and at this level, because
if this is coming, because people argue about when this is written, because it says first performed around 1590.
Just from
How did you write Musidorus if Arcadia is not printed yet? Like, who has manuscript access to the Arcadia in 1590? Like, what is going on here, folks? So, I think this alone suggests that we're not looking at Philip Sidney hard enough. The most popular play of Shakespeare's time is not by Shakespeare, it's not by Marlowe, it's by somebody that we don't even know that jacked it straight out of Philip Sidney. I think I'll leave it on that one. Yeah.
Well, and to wrap up some other points, and shout out to Soltron if you're still on. I have mentioned that I had this book that you recommended, the Touches of Sweet Harmony. Soltron is the one who had.
I totally forgot. Henninger wrote that. I'm coming across Henninger a bunch.
Oh, really?
Stuff and Lyly stuff.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. So, I'm gonna go back to
Sweet Harmony is a phrase that Lyly uses.
Oh yeah. Okay.
His phrase.
And so, I'm going back into critiquing the YouTube channel Right Conscious. But in another video, he talked about, speaking persuasively, and Nietzsche specifically says, when you use words or using arguments, you want to try to craft a picture in someone's head. Don't just, kind of lay it out. You literally use, metaphors that help, stimulate more neurons.
Right.
But, a picture in your head, aka a speaking picture, as already, once again, a Philip Sidney idea again. Just making sure we're on the
just
same.
In case we and so that's another thing that I see a lot on Mariana's channel is we see a lot of Bruno and Art of Memory and Ramos and that kind of thing, and Sidney's obsessed with that stuff. He's all about it, and we see it all over his stuff. So I need to maybe do a Sidney Art of Memory video because I got several essays on that kind of stuff as well. But yeah, Hinninger's good stuff. I haven't got a chance to do Touches of Sweet Harmony yet, Soltron, but I'm going to borrow it as soon as he's done.
I remember we talked about earlier about Sidney having the fully enveloped idea of a project or a rhetoric thing too, that it's a fully formed idea that I talked about, not top down, bottom up, or inside out, or whatever for a thing.
Right, and it relates back to ideas.
So it says Sidney himself calls it the idea or foreconceit, unmistakably having in mind the term idea, a Greek word, as Plato first had used it. Yeah, the idea of form.
Right.
And interesting book.
Delia is, the anagram of ideal from Samuel Bacon. Michael Drayton's sonnet sequence is literally called Idea. And also, shout out to London Prodigal. One of Lancelot Spurcock's daughters in this play is called Delia, which I think is a play on Mary. And the other sister is Frances, which I think is a play on Frances Sidney, a.k.a. Frances Walsingham. And then the other sister is Luce, which I think is a play on Lucy Bedford, who is part of this Sidney family as well.
Well, yeah, interesting. Dang, dude.
Yeah.
Well, we had a good stream tonight. Looked like we ran exactly almost to the 2-hour mark. We had a good amount of people tune in. Yeah, thanks so much for dropping by, everyone. I'll post the, obviously our links that we have in case you want to support us. Get us some beer or something, or if, fund the effort, as Apollo Cobain says. Apparently we got to pay for some of these access to these hidden documents, okay? So if chances, blown through his 100 essays a month on JSTOR, okay? And so we need to fund this guy.
I'm going to see if, because being a high school teacher, you get some access to some of these databases. So I do have access to JSTOR. If you've noticed, I have a predilection for JSTOR. It's because I have access to it. I don't have access to Gale or EBSCO at the moment. There may be others that I do, but if you can find it on JSTOR, I can get it. That said, there may be a way for me to go dig up some stuff on EBSCO or Gale, but we'll see. Alright, on that note, I guess you can sign us out. I gotta get home and get going. I hope to finish some more of these Apocrypha soon. I got to go finish Lyly's last two. I got to read Love's Metamorphosis, and I got to read Mother Bombi, but I've read the other big five. Let's see, what else? I got some essays coming up. Let us know, would you be interested in doing, which videos you'd be interested in doing? I want to go over Laval's essay on Sidney and how to read Sidney correctly. I want to do an essay talking about Samuel Daniel in Richard II and other Shakespeare. Let's see, what was another essay that I wanted to do? Do you remember off the top of your head me mention any of these? Alan Hager, which may be similar to the Ronald Laval, but doing Alan Hager's Dazzling Images, which is also going over maybe not how to read Sidney correctly as much, which he does do, but he's maybe going over why we don't read Sidney correctly. And long story short, it's because of that idiot that wrote Narnia. It all connects.
It's funny.
But yep, I digress. You can sign us out. We can call it a night.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in again. Check all the links down below. And as always, Nullius and